This is the Education Committee of the Board for Vocational Nursing and Psychiatric Technicians. It is October 30th, Monday of 2017, and we are at DCA Headquarters 2 in the North Market Hearing Room, Sacramento. I just received a message less than an hour ago from one of our committee members. He's on a flight that was diverted and will not arrive into Sacramento until a bit after 2:30, but he will come directly from the airport to us, so he sends his apologies. I'm Bernice Basti Martinez, and I chair the Education Committee. I'd like for board staff to introduce themselves, and ask Jessica Gomez to handle that, please.
Hi, I'm Jessica Gomez, a nursing education consultant.
And we're being recorded, if you'll please use the mic.
I am Jessica Gomez, nursing education consultant for the Board of Vocational Nursing and Psychiatric Technicians, and
Good afternoon. I am Geraldine Maracino, Education Analyst with the Board of Vocational Nursing and Psychiatric Technicians in the Education Division.
Good afternoon. My name is Brian Vu, Enforcement Division Chief.
Good afternoon. My name is Tim Matsumoto, and I'm with the Education Division.
And we also have legal counsel, if you'll introduce yourself.
Good afternoon, Kenneth Swenson, Senior Staff Counsel.
And as is our usual, we try to introduce approved schools. I don't have a list here with me. I'll let the schools stand up because I see them looking right at us. If one of your representatives would just introduce yourselves into the mic, please.
I'm Susan Turner, and I'm the interim director at Gavilan College in Gilroy. And I have two colleagues with me.
Thank you.
I'm Janice Ankerman from Napa Valley College, the program director.
Gives everyone a chance to be included. We want to start our meeting with the Pledge of Allegiance. If we'll all stand, I'd ask my legal colleague to lead us, please.
Attention, salute, pledge. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Thank you, Ken. By our agenda, the first item of business is consideration for possible action to make recommendations to the board, and those are recommendations from this committee to the full board, and it would be for the November 2017 board meeting. And I recognize Jessica Gomez. If you will tell us about this institution and the concerns or whatever is in your report by summary, please.
thank you. On June 2017, I received the program record survey data from the director, and due to some concerns that I had with that information, including approved clinical sites and the curriculum, I made an announced visit to the program on October 4th and 5th. During that time, I found a total of 6 violations, one of which has been corrected at this time. It's important to note that the program has only 46 students, and they've had a 100% pass rate for the last 6 consecutive quarters. However, the violations that were identified are very concerning. The first violation that was of concern was in talking with the director and working with the director. It was very evident that she was not actively administering the program. When I asked her how many students she had, she did not know. She said the instructors would know that information. When I asked her how attendance was kept, she said she did not know. The instructors would know this information. When I asked her how remediation was handled, she said she did not know, that it would be the instructors that could answer these questions. There wasn't a question that I asked her that she could honestly give me the answer. One of the real concerns that I had was the number of pharmacology hours that the program had. And if you look at attachments B and C, attachment B on page 2 shows in 2015-16, the school had numbers for their instructional plan, for their curriculum. In attachment C, on the same page, you will also notice that the numbers had drastically changed, and everything was, or the majority of the programs were identified as having 10 integrated hours and 11 content hours in the curriculum for the majority of their courses. Pharmacology being one of them, and pharmacology is required to have a total of a minimum of 54 hours. And so this was of great concern that they did not have it. When I asked the director how many hours she had in the pharmacology course, she again could not tell me. She says it's integrated throughout the program. When I talked with the instructors, again, they told me that it was integrated throughout the program. They did not know how many hours. Another concern or violation was the instructional plan itself. The program was unable to provide me with an instructional plan or the curriculum of the program. The instructional plan by regulation is to be available to each instructor. The instructors had not seen an instructional plan. From the conversations that I had with the director and with the instructors, I was led to believe that there's been numerous changes in the curriculum over the last few years, none of which the board has been privy to. The program also had been using the BRN's regulations rather than the VN's regulations for the curriculum. They had been, at one time, even put the IB in CEU class as part of the program, which has been removed from what I understand it. So having a curriculum that is board recognized and approved is of great concern to make sure that the students are getting the education at an LVN level, not an RN level, and that they are able to know and understand their scope of practice upon completion. One of the issues was they had been using a clinical site that was unapproved, and since then they have gotten the approval for that clinical site. I'm trying to remember that's the majority of the issues that I found with the remediation. They were doing some remediation. They were not documenting remediation at all. They have padded their clinical hours so that when a student misses time, everybody is making up the same amount of hours. So whether they miss time or not, they're having to do these padded makeup hours. And so there was just several issues that were of great concern.
Want to make sure we are understanding. You said of the violations, one has been corrected?
Yes, they did.
Repeat which one that is again?
That is the one of having an unapproved clinical site. It is now an approved site.
Okay, and that came about as the result of receiving documentation and evidence?
And I have talked with the facility also.
Okay, thank you. And at this point, did that one change in violation change any of your overall recommendations?
No, it did not.
Okay. I see there's a representative present from the school. If you'll introduce yourself and if you have any brief comments for you, we will have questions for
Okay.
you.
My name's Susan Turner, and I am faculty, and I actually teach in the RN program. And just since Jessica's visit, we completed my approval as the assistant director. The director that is named in a lot of the violations is now off on medical leave, and so I'm in the process of getting me relieved to work on these problems. And so that I will have the time to attend to it.
Any further comment?
We actually welcomed Jessica's visit. I think it was a fair assessment of the infrastructure of the program. I think in the classroom, we're doing a lot better job, as evidenced by the pass rate of 100%, really almost 100% for years on end. We have great facilities and really wonderful, loyal faculty, but the infrastructure of our leadership has been lacking for a long time. And she picked that up immediately, and it actually validated what the faculty have been concerned about and voicing to administration. And when she voiced it, all of a sudden it gave clarity to administration, which was very helpful for us. So we realize we have a lot of work to do. We really have high standards at the school, and we know we have to get this into shape, but we were powerless as teaching faculty to really make that happen. And so with the violations and recommendations, we will get it fixed, and the administration is supportive to get it fixed. But unfortunately, they didn't really hear us until Ms. Gomez helped them hear us.
Okay, thank you. I just want to make sure I'm clear as a member of the Education Committee. I see your stats in terms of pass rate, which are stellar. I also understand the curriculum as of late, and we don't have a sense how long that you've been using an RN curriculum versus an LVN curriculum. But students have been passing. I'm wondering if that is also attributed not only to your excellence in teaching, but to the fact that they have been exposed to a curriculum that surpasses the requirements for the LVN. Can you speak to that?
Yes, it was a long, convoluted process that went on, probably starting around 2007 or 2008. And we received word from one of our clinical sites, which was Kaiser San Jose, that they were no longer going to take LVN students. And our director at the time wanted to move us to be a 3-year RN program so that we could retain that clinical site, and that we would still keep all the BVN requirements, but then essentially that they would just seamlessly go through the program, do all the first and second year, as we've always done it, as the LVN, and have a third year RN, but that we would be able to call the students RN students all the way through so we could keep the clinical site. We actually, as faculty, thought that had been approved by the boards, and I was actually writing some accreditation documents probably around 2009, and I called the director to ask what date was it effective we became a 3-year RN program, and she informed me that we had not ever become a 3-year RN program, that it never had happened, and that was, to the faculty, a surprise. So at that point, we were using some RN textbooks. Actually, Linda, do you think that's about the right years? About the right years. So we're using some RN textbooks in the LVN, first and second year. And once we found out that we were not a 3-year RN program, I raised the question about the IV therapy, because we had chopped it up and were including it in the LVN program. We have gotten rid of that, and because it needed to be post-licensure. And at that point, with that director, she had been there a long time, but the infrastructure was really starting to fail. So then she retired, then we had a new director, and the infrastructure continued to fail. And 2 years ago, we went to all RN books, all LVN books.
All except for fundamentals, yes.
Except for fundamentals, which is the Potter and Perry that was used goes frequently for LVN or RN. But Debbie received word probably from you that there should be no RN books, and immediately that was changed. And actually, the college repurchased the books for the students so that they didn't buy 2 sets of textbooks. So it is all LVN curriculum and textbooks that we're using. And like I said, we're in the classroom, and I think at the hospital, the faculty are loyal and very good, as evidenced by our pass rate. But I think that we know that the infrastructure and the document support, as far as course outlines, instructional plan, they're not in place, and they need to be, and they all need to sing the same song.
And thank you. I just want to make sure I'm communicating what I'm asking about. Because you've been using an RN-focused curriculum, now that you're moving to the appropriate curriculum for LVNs, do you see that affecting your pass rate potentially?
I think the pass rate will still stay the same. I think the level that we push our students, I think it will continue at 100%. It's rare that we ever have any that don't pass. I mean, every once in a while, we get a 92%, because we're not a big school. If you get one fail, it really affects the numbers. But for years and years and years, it's always been stellar.
So if I'm hearing you correctly, it is not just the content of the curriculum, which had, you said, from 2009 forward, have been moving to a 100% RN curriculum.
I've been there since 2004, and I think it's never gone below 92%, and that's only been a couple of times. It's been 100% virtually
Thank you.
all the time.
Thank you. I asked that question very deliberately because pass rate is the measure of program success before an individual goes into actual practice.
I think one of the things about our students is the clinical sites that we have are just such awesome sites compared to a lot of other LVN schools. We have, 3 acute hospitals that we use. They actually get OB, where there's lots of babies being born. We really have such a rich, diverse, the patient load that they get is, a lot of schools probably don't have the clinical opportunities that our students get. I think that makes a big difference. And we have, I think Jessica in her report wrote that every faculty we had has been with us at least 2 years, many of them many years, and most of our faculty were students of ours in the past. So then we know, we have these really excellent students, and we say, okay, we'll be talking to you in 5 years.
Another concern, the number of hours in pharmacology. Clearly, there have been some students who have completed the program, who are now out practicing. Is there any thought of what might be done in terms of those individuals?
I think that the students have had a lot more practice than the documentation shows, because we have pharmacology in many of our lectures. If you're talking about cardiac, it's hard to not talk about cardiac drugs and diuretics and things like that. And then we also have skills lab, where they're practicing reconstituting drugs, giving injections, and the drugs. I think our problem is in the infrastructure and the documentation that doesn't show where it all is, and we need to fix that.
So I do see some recommendations here, Ms. Gomez, in terms of reporting and the like. So from the institution, I can assume we will see some corrections on where pharmacology is being taught and practiced, as well as any other area that might have been integrated into your overall curriculum. So we won't have a similar question about another feature or element.
We're going to put this together, and Jessica has been so awesome. She met with us for several hours last Thursday to really give us some direction. And it's really been very helpful. We'll get it together. The date that she had in her report was November 10th to get this instructional plan, which is day by day, and I'm thinking, oh my gosh, there's 175 days in a teaching year, so that's 350 days, and she had November 10th. That's really not possible. If I stayed up every night forever, so I submitted the plan of correction on Friday, which was the 27th, which was the day she asked for a plan of correction and the timeline. And I asked for the instructional plan to be due December 31st, which I'm working to try and get some relief for me, and it takes all faculty input. Our faculty wants very much to be involved, and November 10th is less than 2 weeks away. It's just not possible.
Just for a bit of clarity for me, you, up until a few days ago, were full-time faculty.
Mm-hmm.
I would assume your classes, you still are the instructor.
I am right now, and I'm in the process of trying to get someone to take over mine so I can, the director, the named and approved director for our program is off on medical leave just recently.
In understanding the community college system, I'm at fuzzy as you. The fact that day one in the middle of a semester or a term, you just don't all of a sudden walk out and no one teaches your class.
Right. So I'll be in clinical tomorrow with my students.
All right.
But we're working to try and get me some relief.
I am concerned, is the December 31 date sufficient?
I'm not sure.
You are still full-time faculty?
We will get me relief by then. Whether it's 100% of the time, I'm not sure. But we will get me relief by the semester ends December 11th. I'm hoping that we can. I'm concerned about not having it done by December 31st because there's other documents that have to be done, course outlines and all the program hours. And we would like to be able to admit a class in the fall. But that,
Following up on that, there are other faculty involved, which means there will possibly be a need to redo what they have planned for their own courses. You're building a plan of work that they are to follow, even with December 31st. When does the next term start? January what?
it starts the last day of January, I think it is.
So that is barely 30 days with faculty under contract. You said you have administrative support. Does that include administrative support for time for faculty so they can gear up and get ready for the coming term?
Well, the faculty are going to be giving input along the way on this instructional plan. So,
Excuse me for interrupting. You are under contract as faculty?
yes.
Okay. And there are so many faculty days under contract, so there's a potential of asking them, you and your colleagues, to do days that are not part of the contractual agreement.
Right. And the college, will be asking them for some kind of support with that because I don't see this, it's a huge plan.
As the chair of the education committee, we're asking that you get documentation for that in protection of you and your colleagues.
And documentation of the hours that we're
To
doing.
know that you will get support for working outside of the agreed upon contract time.
Okay, well, thank you very much.
Or else it really cannot be done. Because technically, your contract protects you from working out of time of the contract. That's a faculty contract for all faculty in the California Community College.
All our full-time faculty are under contract, and our part-time faculty, some of them have contracts also, and some are paid hourly without necessarily a contract.
Totally understand that. It's just a strong recommendation so that you can meet without any interference of faculty saying, oops, the contract won't allow me to.
I think that's great. Thank you very much.
Okay. One other question, please. You said at some time there was commentary about a 3-year RN program. At that time, was the thought that the LVN program walked or was part of the RN or the front of the RN program?
We actually thought it was in effect, and we thought the first 2 years was their LVN, and the last year was their RN, but they were still considered under an RN program, auspices as well as an LVN. And we actually thought it was in effect. And the director, I don't even know how to say, we were shocked.
You don't need to say anymore.
We were shocked.
Out of caution, based on what I'm hearing, you might want to check to see what your status is with your RN if you have not already done that.
The RN board was at the college 2 years ago, and we did discuss it then, but it was still already a done deal a few years before that. And I don't believe, she was a newer nursing education consultant, and she was not aware of that had been discussed before. It was with a previous nursing education consultant. And I know when it was first discussed, I was there. And then we change course numbers, which it looks like from the documents that you have, you were never apprised of the new course numbers, which was all part of this communication problem.
Right. That raises another question. There are procedures by which courses and course numbers, titles, even content gets changed within a community college.
And it went through the college curriculum, but it evidently never got to the Board of Vocational Nursing.
Okay, so we would anticipate seeing a whole different set of course numbers and potentially titles. And
It sounds like we're feeling like we're starting, writing a whole LVN curriculum from scratch.
okay, given that reality, what is the pace and time in which new courses and revisions can be carried through your curriculum process, which I'm sure includes your faculty or academic senate?
When I spoke to the dean last week, if they're at the beginning of spring semester, which is approximately the 1st of February, for course outlines to get through the process, that we would be, if we had it there at the very beginning of February, it would be, because it would be a high priority for the college, it would be for fall the following year.
Fall of 2018.
Yes. And that would be the quickest it would get through curriculum.
So just a recommendation, because that is a process that we all know on our campuses can slow us down.
For sure.
That you might make reference to that as you report to us. You know, once it's to wherever the major intake for changes on your campus, it's out of your hands. Other than we ask, where is it? How is it going? But it's technically out of the hands of the program faculty, and it will only move at the speed at which it moves. And so that we understand it's not you necessarily that might be slowing the process by including in your written reports when the documents go to the next level of review.
Right, but my understanding is it has to come to you before it goes to curriculum.
Well, yes, but they will not be courses, even though they've come to the board, if your institution
Right.
Does not approve them.
Right.
And then they could not be enacted. So we want to make sure all bases are covered.
We want to do it the right way.
Great willingness, and we want to make sure that we're there in your support too.
Well, so far, it's been awesome. She gave us a few hours of her time and has been very, very helpful. So we want to have it fixed. We feel like we do a good job in the classroom, but we don't have the infrastructure and supporting documents that it should all be in sync. We realize that it's not, and we'll get it, hopefully we'll do it right the first time, but if not, we'll keep working on it.
Thank you. Ms. Gomez, the recommendations to this committee that the committee can act on are?
To place the Gavilan College Vocational Nursing Program on provisional approval for a 2-year period from November 17th, 2017 through November 31st, and issue certificate accordingly. Place the program on the place the program on the November 19th board agenda for reconsideration approval. Rescind the program's ongoing admissions of one class of students per year to replace graduating students effective immediately. Require the program to admit no additional classes without approval by the board. Require the program to evaluate the program curriculum and submit curriculum revision that meets the board requirements no later, and we'll change that to December 31st. and require the director to submit follow-up reports in 10 months and no later than September 1st, 2018, and 22 months later, which is September 1st, 2019. The report must include a comprehensive analysis of the program, and there it goes from A to O. Continue the program to require to comply with all approved standards in Articles 4 of the Vocational Nursing Program Act and commencing with the Business Profession Code, Section 2880, and Article 5 of the California Code of Regulations, Title 16. And failure to take any of these corrective actions may cause the full board to revoke the program.
And this will certainly be on the November 2017 board agenda in a couple of weeks.
And I do plan to attend. I'll be here for the directors' meeting the day before and also for the board meeting.
Thank you. Any other committee comments?
Question for you.
And we don't have any other committee present.
As part of that.
So at this
I just
time,
noticed this part.
any public comment? And if so, please approach the mic, and if you please give us your name.
It's not going to be easy if she does.
Seeing none, the committee will accept your report, Ms. Gomez, and recommendations, and we endorse those recommendations, and we'll bring them to the board at its November meeting in a few weeks. Thank you, and thank you to you. Good luck in your work.
We have plenty to do. Thanks.
Ms. Gomez, are there any other schools to be presented at this time?
No, there are not.
Okay, thank you. Next item, discussion and possible action to make recommendations to the board regarding establishment of fixed pass rate as condition of board approval of enrollment of students in educational programs. And that is for both LVN and PT licensees.
Thank you. Before I get into our recommendation, I'm going to give another overview as I did last.
Make sure they can hear you in the mic. I know we must have an audience watching somewhere, wherever this is being broadcast.
I know at the last meeting, the chair of this committee had given guidance to staff to do due diligence in terms of more research. Before I get to that, I'm going to go over another overview of the issue, just to refresh everyone's memory. Over the past 10 years, California's LVN pass rate among the 50 states is as follows. 4 times California ranked 50th out of 50 in 07, 08, 2012, 2016. 3 times California ranked 49th out of 50. 2009, 2010, 2015. 2 times California ranked 48th out of 50, 2011 and 2014. And 1 time California ranked 47th out of 50, 2013. So the question is, do the regulations do enough to strengthen licensee integrity? Our current regulations, specifically California Code of Regulations, Title 16, Section 2530L and L1, currently allows schools to operate without being placed on provisional approval if their pass rates do not fall below 10% of the statewide average annual pass rate, and to maintain this for 2 years or 8 consecutive months. Our statutory authority, B&P Code Section 2841 and 4501.1, mandates the board to protect California consumers by exercising its licensing, regulatory, and disciplinary functions. Regulations, specifically California Code of Regulations Title 16, give the board rulemaking authority to accomplish this mandate. Staff believe in order to meet this mandate, it must amend its current regulations to allow for a fixed pass rate. Currently, we have 75%, and to keep this pass rate for 1 year or 4 consecutive quarters, or be subject to provisional approval. Staff feel that with this amendment in regulations, it will allow the board the ability to react more quickly and potentially place a school on provisional approval, creating a closer partnership with one goal, success for the school, and improve the quality of education and instruction and increase student achieving, ultimately aligning with the board's mission of protecting consumers. At the last committee meeting, the education chair requested additional information. I'll defer that to staff, who will speak on the methodology and his findings.
Good afternoon. My name is Tim Matsumoto, and based on the previous committee meeting, Geraldine had taken notes and comments from that meeting and created a survey to determine what other states are doing. This survey consisted of 7 questions of various inquiries, such as, do you have fixed pass rates? What is your percentage? And do you take first-time test takers into consideration when calculating the pass rates? That's just a sampling of those questions. With the help of the NCSBN, the survey was sent statewide, and we recently got some hits on that. As of about a few hours ago, 25 states have actually responded to the survey, which kind of pleasantly surprised us, the fact that they've gotten back to us so quickly. We're not able to determine which states responded to which question because that, I guess it's kind of an anonymity issue. So we can't tell you directly if the 7 states that you had requested we look at, we can survey directly, but it's possible that 25% survey.
What each state said.
Oh, you do have it? Oh, great. I'm sorry to potentially mislead you. We do have which state done which. So we can't find out
Thank you.
of those 7 states you had mentioned earlier. It wasn't on the sheet that I had, so I'm sorry I didn't read it. I have to apologize. I was just assisting Geraldine on this, and so she's the primary on this, but she's been so busy that and she's taking notes.
All about teamwork.
Yeah, she's feverishly taking notes, so we thought we'd just teamwork this out.
Thank
So
you.
so in any event, what we kind of found out was pretty interesting. In response to question number 1, 20 of the 25 states do in fact indicate that they have fixed pass rates. And of those, we've asked a secondary question, well, what is their fixed pass rates? 75% is the lowest percentage of fixed pass rates, and 4 states indicated that's what they use as their baseline. 8 states had indicated that they use an 80% pass rate. 1 state said 85%, and 3 states said they use 95% of the nationwide average. So apparently, yes, there is some room for, there shouldn't be, this is an item for discussion, I should say, for which Brian will speak to earlier, about creating a fixed pass rate for the state of California so that we can move forward and help schools by placing them on provisional approval. It gets them motivated to increase their pass rates.
Could you help us by sharing which states, even though we don't know the particulars about those states? Oh, thank you.
I have to apologize, I
If the
hadn't.
general public doesn't have this, could someone just read a list of the states, if you don't mind?
I didn't see it.
Is that possible to do?
Oh.
Yes, we have Arkansas, New Mexico, Vermont, Ohio, Louisiana, Pennsylvania, Nevada, Wyoming, Iowa, Missouri, Colorado, Tennessee, Nebraska, Louisiana, Massachusetts, Georgia, Florida, North Carolina, and Idaho, and New Hampshire. At the last meeting, you had given us specific states that are very comparable to California. We are waiting on a few responses, but in the sample size we've gotten, the overwhelming majority is that there is a fixed pass rate, with 75% being the lowest, which would be California's proposal if the board were to move forward with this amendment.
And if I heard correctly, 25 of 50 states, that's 50%. When one is doing survey data, that's pretty good in terms of return. Survey data, you get very low response. So 50%, and you're still waiting for more, I'm amazed.
Now, this survey was put up.
Whatever you did to get those states to respond, keep doing it. I think there's some doctoral students who would like to learn how you did that.
Yeah, this survey was put up this morning, so again, we do expect more return within the next few days.
I'm sorry, you said it went up this morning?
Correct. We were at work on this survey for the past week, but this morning, in the few hours.
You know that that's phenomenal.
Yeah.
If the survey went up and is opened this morning and you've got 50% response, that's incredible. That I can only imagine, even if you got 5 more in the rest of this week, you have surpassed what is the general return for survey data collection.
Credit goes to Jessica and Geraldine, who have spearheaded this.
I hear it's a team.
So.
Good. You mentioned some recommendations in terms of a fixed number or percentage. Can you talk to us a little bit more about the identification of that particular number and rationale?
In terms of rationale, I'll go back to the background. It's important to note that the board passed a motion in 2014 to explore this possibility. At that time, staff was given the mandate to pursue regulations. However, due to priorities, it went nowhere. In terms of the number, I think Tim can speak more to that number, but studies show again that with all the states polled, that is the lowest acceptable passage rate. Tim, speak to the methodology.
One of the reasons we considered 75% as a recommendation is that's what the BRN is using right now. And so we felt that it's could be a stark contrast to where we are today. We are at 10% of the California statewide average, which unfortunately puts the pass rates in the, I think it's a 60%.
60s.
In the 60% pass rate. And so as a result of not wanting to go like into pass rate shock, so to speak, we thought that 75% might be acceptable first step. And then finding out, based upon what the board feels, if that's an acceptable recommendation, that's what staff thought initially putting forth. But if the board feels that it should be potentially higher percentage, we'll gladly write the regulations in accordance with the board's direction.
Thank you. The particular list of states, it came as a result of much public comment, and particularly a comment that we received during the data gathering sessions around the scope of practice. And there have been 4 of those sessions run by staff, and actually they functioned as a subcommittee of the Education Committee. 2 in the southern part of California, and 2 here in Northern California. And while the focus was upon the scope of practice for both PT and LVN, the addition of a question to get some feedback from our constituents was a very eye-opening. And one of the biggest concerns was about no other state is like California demographically. And so we tried very hard to identify several states that have very similar demographics. And that was why the list in that request. Given it's only been, it hasn't been 24 hours, I would suspect, hopefully we will hear more from those states, and certainly in time for the upcoming board meeting, that those states, hopefully they'll respond, can be highlighted in terms of what they do. I think that our constituent groups, particularly directors, owners of the schools and programs, want to know. And I know my colleagues on the board will be interested as well. Is there any other information? I'm still in shock about what great research findings you have.
Oh, I have one point of clarification.
Yes, please.
The percentages and all of the surveys we've done are for the VN program.
Ah,
We didn't, since the PT program isn't a nationwide program, we didn't have an ability to do any nationwide surveys of that. But I just wanted to make sure we were clear on that.
you want to make sure that's clear for the board?
Yes.
Okay. Thank you. The Education Committee's position would be, if we're setting a rate or make a recommendation for such, it should be for all licensees handled by this board.
Yes.
And I don't know if someone can help me. From our last Education Committee meeting, we crafted a would-be motion, and it said we would talk more specifically about it, in other words, criteria at the next board meeting, and at the next committee meeting, and particularly after getting more input from staff researchers. Let me see how my mind is functioning. If I recall correctly, we were, as a committee, recommending a fixed pass rate. We did not put in a number, but at this time, it certainly should not be less than 75%. And there's a potential it could be higher, but it should not be less than 75 for all licensees. And the part that was not addressed definitively, it was about the criteria under which this might be implemented.
Correct.
You know, are we going to grandfather it in? Will we give schools time to adjust? Particularly, we do have schools that are below 75%. We don't want to penalize them unduly. We want to make sure everyone has a reasonable amount of time. But at the same time, if this is to go forward, there should be some parameters and definition on how it will be implemented, when it would start, and how we roll current institutions, particularly those that are on provisional basis, into the mix. Does staff have any more comment or information that would be helpful for us?
One of the questions that we did ask on the survey was, does your board include graduate names when sharing examination results with the VPN school or program? Of the number that we received, 17 said yes and 8 said no.
Thank you.
I know at the last meeting, that was something the schools had requested, but in talking to legal counsel, that was an area of concern too. So that is something to weigh into consideration.
Is there a second recommendation as to how we might address the concerns of our constituencies?
If I'm not mistaken, I believe BRN does disclose that information, correct?
Disclosure of the information without a release by the student could result in a possible violation of the Information Practices Act. That was the concern. And the way that could be addressed would be through a release that the examinee would execute at the time of the examination. So that would have to be looked at, language would have to be developed, and it'd have to be approved by both the board and by the by those administering the examination.
I need a clarification. Help me, I understood that the examiners, the makers of the exam, will make such information available to schools for a fee. Can someone help me with that, please?
Mountain Measures is what you're talking about. And yes, there is a fee that the schools pay. It does not give the student name, but it gives a total information about how the students did on each question or each area of the test. So they get really excellent information if they will purchase that.
Does it also include how many of the test takers are first-time testers?
I believe it goes for all first-time testers.
Thank you. I thought I'd heard it somewhere. I didn't dream it. So as an alternative, that is something that could be made possible. If staff has time, it would be helpful to have a one-pager for board colleagues so they know there's something available really almost immediately. I know there is a cost to that, but it's a cost to the institution. Because they would be receiving the information. If I also understand correctly, that's information that we as a board, we do not get that kind of information. Is that correct?
Correct.
That's correct. All we get is the number of students that passed with their names. And we do not get who passed what questions or any information regarding the questions or the integrity of how the schools did. This is something that they have to purchase in order to get that information. We don't get it.
So putting the two together, or hold on, Ms. Gomez, putting the two together, working with the makers of the test, an institution, a program can get a certain amount of information. And that could be done almost immediately for a fee. In the meantime, we could be running potentially a parallel request to identify the appropriate language and have it incorporated into, is it statute or what?
the individual examinee would have to sign a release for their information to their program. That would be done on a case-by-case basis at the time of the examination. The form for doing that would be something that the board could develop in consultation with the examination service.
Okay. So simultaneously, that is a second possibility for additional information. One that we would not have direct mandate on, but we could work toward that end. And we do understand there are legal ramifications, but we would want to make sure institutions have access to something to assist them and help them.
Yes, if they purchased it, they don't get it, it's not an immediate thing. I believe it's either once or twice a year they get it, so it would not be with each quarter, but they do get an in-depth information on each topic and how the students did in each topic.
Okay, thank you. If that one pager will also reflect that last bit of information,
Okay.
that it's a one-time a year,
Or one or two times, I believe, yeah. I
but
know-
it's limited.
It is limited, yes.
If we had 99 students and each took it one day out of the 300 and some odd days in a year, there would not be 99 reports. It would only be within the time frame that the test makers release that information.
Yes, and it is a specific time, and it is looking at all test takers and how they did on the exam.
Thank you. Very helpful. Additionally, of concern would be what kind of staff time would be needed to enact or do the work that would be related to moving to a fixed rate. And why do I mention staff time? We would need to go through and identify what schools are below that, what could be done in terms of working with them to assist with a speedy increase in pass rates, if anything. But that is staff time. That's not part of anyone's portfolio at this time or anyone's position description. But we do want to take that into consideration. We would not want to recommend something and leave people hanging.
I think at this time, the workload, if adopted by the board, can be absorbed. We have Geraldine, who was just recently hired to kind of assist with this special project in terms of identifying which schools need to be looked at. In terms of the actual regulatory process, that is a lengthy process, but we have staff in place who can set milestones and show the board each step of the way. That can be timelined out, and that's not an issue. The most time-consuming portion will be the actual crafting of language, which I will work directly with legal counsel, but that is the most lengthy component.
So we're talking about within a calendar year or less, potentially?
Yes, I believe that is feasible.
Okay, thank you. I'd like to accept public comment, if any. If so, please approach, and if you don't mind, give us your name.
Hi, my name is Janice Ankenman, and I
Good
am
afternoon.
the VN and ADN Program Director at Napa Valley College, which is a community college. I just had a couple of concerns, which is why I drove here today. One of my concerns is, since we just talked about names, I find the names very helpful from the BRN. It lets me double-check first-time test status or not with the BRN's records. It also gives me a better clue of where the students came from and whether I need to redirect my focus for some populations of our students. And I don't get that information from the Mountain Measure. So there's a reason not to pick at anybody, but just so that I have a better idea of what's going on and where I need to focus our attentions so that we allow all of our population of students to have equal success. Okay. My biggest concern was the concern about, actually, first time, the pass rate, the fixed pass rate, I think is a great idea. I'm actually quite embarrassed when I say I'm from California and we look at the BV and PT, VN pass rates, because they're embarrassing. 75%, I think, is a good start place, and I think it needs to be higher. Most of our VNs take care of a very risky, high population of patients, mostly our geriatric population of patients, and they deserve quality, safe patient care as much as anybody else does. So I think a 75% pass rate as a start is a great place to start. My concern is the provisional approval on an annual basis, because there are some programs like mine where we only admit once every 2 years. We have a part-time program, which would mean every other year I would have a 0 pass rate, and I would then be chasing every year, every other year, to get that done, to justify why I have that pass rate. And the reason I would have that pass rate is because I won't have anyone testing, hopefully. Hopefully, they will have already tested, and they're in the process of the first year, and I'm waiting for them to get done with the second year. So,
I think to address that concern, I think we can construct verbiage within regulations to kind of address specific situations. Obviously, that would be unfair to penalize a school that is operating on every other year basis. I do think with legal counsel's assistance, we can craft verbiage, again, that takes into account different scenarios.
before I step away, I just want to check and make sure I covered.
And thank you for coming. By the way, we hope your campus was not seriously affected by the recent fires.
Actually, our campus was closed for 2 weeks because the communities around us were significantly affected, both Napa and Sonoma and Lake County and Santa Rosa. And we were an evacuation center for those 2 weeks. We had approximately 800 people living in our gym, 2 gymnasiums and our cafeteria, and out in the parking lot. So it was a very educational opportunity for all of us from a nursing perspective as well as from a human perspective. And many of our students volunteered time of their own volition during that period of time to help take care of evacuees. And we actually did a lot of medical procedures in our gymnasiums. We had some medical facilities that sent physicians and nurses that were there routinely. But it was a good lesson for all of us, and it certainly was an opportunity for us to look at how we needed to change some things so that we could be prepared the next time there may be one, if there is another disaster. So, thank you for asking.
Everyone is concerned.
Yes. Yes, it's hard when people lose their homes and everything that they've owned, whether they be faculty or students, and there have been quite a few of those. I think that's all. My concern was primarily the provisional status being annually versus every other year, but if that can be accommodated, I think that's fair. And I didn't realize that this was going to include the Psychiatric as well. So I'm sure Robert Millay will be interested in that. He's in charge of the Psychiatric program, but I will share that information with him. And I don't think that's a problem for him either, but again, we are looking for quality, and we know that psych techs and VNs take care of as many patients as RNs do, and their role is just as important, different, but just as important. So, okay, thank you for your time.
A question back to you.
Yes.
You mentioned 75% was a start.
Mm-hmm.
Would you have any recommendation for a more appropriate percentage?
Actually, I think 75 is a good place to start, since there are many people that are probably in the 60s at this point in time. But I don't see there any problem with our aspiring for it to be higher. I think it would be good for our community, it would be good for our nursing students, and it's good for our programs. It gives us something to work on. There's always things to work on, but I think that aspiring to do better is always a good thing. And pushing it to 80% at some point in time might be a good place to go.
Thank you so much.
Okay, thank you.
And thank you for driving from Napa.
No problem, thank you.
Other public comment? All right. Thank you. I think with the help of staff, we have a better picture. We'll look forward to some summation of data for the upcoming November board meeting. And as stated a bit earlier, we will be recommending as a matter of fact, I'm going to put a hold on that. Our board member, evidently a flight just landed. And we welcome Ken Maxey while he has a chance to kind of get seated and situated. We are, Ken, we are talking about the decision recommendations in terms of a fixed pass rate. And staff has provided incredible information. They sent out a survey that opened this morning, and 50% of the states have already responded, and it hasn't been 24 hours. So that in itself is stellar. At this point, we have a simulation of a motion recommending that the board consider a fixed pass rate not to be less than 75%. We will have to work on the criteria by which it is implemented, because we don't want to do harm to some institutions that are below that at this time. But we would expect that they will meet that within a reasonable time frame. Additionally, the concern was asked about staff and staff time, particularly in writing the necessary documents and getting the necessary legal approval so that this could move forward to actually become part of the code that surrounds what we do in our work. And I don't know, I know you need to catch your breath. If you have any comment or thought about a fixed pass rate, and this would be basically on first-time testers.
Hello, everyone. My apologies. My feelings are that this seems to be the right step in many cases. I think that a fixed rate appears to be something that others are moving towards. But at the same time, I want to make sure that, Chairwoman, that we are not doing anything out of the ordinary that is not across the country a trend. So if that seems to be, and it sounds like that's what you're saying, then I'm supportive of that.
Thank you. Yes, you want to make a comment again about what you found from 25 states? In other words, about pass rate?
Sure.
I know we're being a little redundant, but
Yeah.
I think this will be helpful.
So last week, staff was working on generating some survey questions to adequately address this question to comparable states. That we reached out to the NCSBN, who posted that to their website this morning. And within a few hours, we got about 25 out of 50 states who responded. The overwhelming majority does show that most states do have a fixed pass rate, 75% being the lowest, which is a figure that we would recommend initially. Again, that's just 50%, so we do expect more. at the last meeting, the chair of this committee did want us to look specifically at comparable states to California in regards to demographics. So we have a few states thus far that meet that criteria. We're waiting on a few more. We'll follow up if need be. But we want to make sure that if we do move forward with this proposal, we have all information to make an informed decision.
In the state that I'm sounding redundant in questioning, so what particular states have or do have a comparable 75% rate that are either New York, Illinois, Texas, Florida? Just a question.
That information is available. We just haven't summarized it in the form that you're asking right at this moment. We can get that to you, and it'll be in a follow-up to the board, to the committee, excuse me.
Okay. Yeah, I was just handed some information, and it does look Florida is a no, actually, and that Massachusetts is a yes. I'm just looking at states that are comparable
Correct.
in comparison to our population here and the people that we serve in this great state. And it looks like there are some others that are definitely yeses. So, okay, this is suffice for me. I just wanted to have some background.
And for the November board meeting, we will have summarized data to kind of give a high-level overview to every board member when the recommendation does come across. But we will have all that information at that time.
With the understanding, again, I am still amazed. You opened a survey this morning, and you have 25 states that responded in less than 24 hours. So one would hope we'd have another half of those in a week from now. We'll see. But that's highly, highly respected. Other questions or comments?
So just so I'm clear, we're voting on this today to ensure that the 75% stands as moving forward, the pass rate.
What we want to do today, good question, is determine what our recommendation would be to the full board. At the August board meeting, this committee was asked to look into what would that mean and to make some kind of recommendation to the full board by its next meeting, which is the November meeting. And it's almost tomorrow. So at this time, I formally move that as an education committee, we recommend the setting of a fixed pass rate no lower than 75% for all first-time test takers. And for clarity, that's PTs and VNs. And that there be a set of criteria to support or help schools that are not currently at 75% or better work toward meeting that goal within a calendar year after it goes into effect.
There is one more component to the regulation. 75% fixed rate is the number that we do want, but also to lower that rate from a school keeping that for currently 2 years or 8 consecutive quarters to 1 year or 4 consecutive quarters. That is a second component to the regulation.
Can you state that one more time?
So currently, our regulation states failure to maintain the required yearly average minimum pass rate for 2 years or 8 consecutive quarters may be cause to place a program on provisional approval. We want to amend that current regulation to read failure to maintain the required yearly average minimum pass rate for 1 year or 4 consecutive quarters may be cause to place a program on provisional approval. So it lowers that time frame.
In all due respect, as the maker of the motion, I deliberately did not speak to that component. I believe it is worth full board discussion.
Yes.
And I believe we probably will have some public comment about that. So in all fairness, I do not wish to include that in my motion. Thank you.
I would second any motion that just was up until that point. With the sidestep of a comment, which is, I do believe that this is an important addition to any statement that the chairwoman has made, but I do believe that and I agree with the chairwoman, that this is something that the entire board should discuss, and that I believe that with good discussion, we can come back to this committee and we focus on that.
Thank you.
Thank you. We have a motion, and before we vote, we will accept public comment, if any. Hearing none, we call for a voice vote.
That would be an aye for me.
I'm sorry?
That would be an aye in
Thank you.
supporting the
Aye.
amendment.
And the motion carries. And this would be a recommendation to the board. Thank you, staff, again. Thank you, everyone who's contributed to helping us with this thinking.
Thank you.
Next agenda item. Public comment on items not on the agenda. The committee will not take any action on any item raised during this section, except to decide whether to place the matter on the agenda for a future meeting. And that is according to Government Code Sections 11125 and 11125.7A. Public comment? Hearing none. Suggestions for future agenda items? Colleague?
Nothing that I have right now. Nothing that I have right now.
Legal?
It may be worthwhile putting on as an agenda item, follow-up on the implementation of regulations, assuming the board takes action at the November meeting.
Thank you. I know it will be coming in the near future, but want to make sure we keep this in mind. We'll be getting a report from staff about the data gathering that's been done over the summer in terms of recommendations affecting the scope of practice for PTs and VNs. And so an update at our next meeting, and then we do anticipate receiving a full report at the end of the year, because the committee will be asked to report at the first board meeting of 2018. Anything else for the agenda? This has been a very good time. We appreciate the input of everyone present. We particularly appreciate the hard work and dedication of staff. It is impossible to do what we do without the information you put together to assist us. I call for adjournment. Thank you, everyone. Have a good day.